Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here tonight. I'm very excited that Emily and Lauren are here to talk with you all about the introduction to college applications. So I'm hoping that all of you who are here tonight are rising seniors or in some way or another planning to apply in this coming application cycle, because this webinar is for you. So Lauren is our Director of College Advising. She's a former admissions officer at Williams College in Massachusetts. And she's also a former licensed psychologist. And so she brings a wonderful perspective to the college admission process, both from an admission standpoint and from a professional psychology practice standpoint as well. And Emily is one of our wonderful college advisors here on the team. She's former admissions officer from Emory, UMiami, and UNC, but we couldn't fit all of that on the screen, so we just gave you Emory. And she is also a full-time college counselor at a high school as well. So she works with students both at LP and outside of LP, helping them navigate their way through the college process, which is wonderful. So I'm super excited to introduce them to you today. They are going to be taking you through kind of the timeline, expectations, everything that you'll need to go over in the course of your application process. So I will leave it to Emily and Lauren to take it away and share with you where we're going tonight.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are so excited to welcome you and excited to launch you and your children into this next very exciting stage of the process. Just to orient you overall to how we're structuring this evening, Emily and I will talk for between about 30 and 45 minutes, ideally leaving a lot of time for questions. So please take note of your questions at the end of our presentation. Olivia will moderate any questions you may have so that Emily and I can help clarify any outstanding information. For tonight, there are a number of things that we're going to cover. The first is basically, how do you prepare applications? We also want to talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities. Obviously, we have a responsibility towards you, but as participants in this process and actors in your own lives, we also want to empower you to have some really important responsibilities as well. We're going to talk about the application deadlines and a little bit of an overview of the application process. We're also going to talk about a holistic review. I'm sure you've all heard that term. It's hard to really understand what it means, and even more difficult sometimes to know what that means in an application context. And then we're also going to talk about this important and sometimes elusive issue of how do you stand out in the application process and become recognizable and desirable to the readers of your applications.
Perfect. And so just in terms of application preparation, I know that this question has come up a lot with my students. Am I doing what I need to do right now? When should I be working on essays? How should my college list be coming together? So here are some snapshots of kind of the timing of when you should be doing what. So this is obviously for our 11th graders going into 12th grade right now. College research, absolutely chatting with your advisors, looking at websites, trying to do as much research as you can to figure out which colleges are standing out and which colleges you would potentially like to visit. And so between now and I would say July, great time to visit some college campuses, especially when classes are in session and you can get a nice sense of the vibrancy on those college campuses. Starting to work on essays. At Logic Prep, we are working on matching students and certainly we'll begin that process very heavily in June. But if you want to start brainstorming with your advisors, starting to think about the essay process, those are definitely coming. I think it's always nice to check in with your teachers and chat with your advisors, who are going to be the right teachers for recommendation letters. It's nice to give them a heads up as they go into the summer months to know that they'll be writing your letter of recommendation. And also between now and midsummer, so again, that July range, trying to wrap up your testing. There are a couple more SAT dates in May and June. If you don't live in New York, you can also do a July. And then for the ACT, there are tests in June and July. So starting to wrap those up if you can. Um, Looking at that time frame between July and early fall before you get into the thick of actually submitting applications, you're finalizing that college list. Hopefully you've done your research, you visited a couple of schools, you know which ones that you step foot on and you're like, this is my place. Doing those visits, talking to students, it's a great time to do that. Your application strategies, we will talk about this in a later slide, but knowing when an early decision application makes sense, early action, regular decision, those are strategies that we can certainly help you with, and know when it's appropriate to apply early versus regular. Finishing the personal statements, that's your big essay that you're submitting. That's great to finish before the school year starts as classes and everything else pick up. And then starting to sign up for interviews. I've noticed that with a few colleges, their interview time slots start to fill up as we get into the school year. And so it's important to have those in place. And then in the fall, so this is as the school year is beginning, getting into holiday season and into January, obviously finishing all of your essays so you can submit applications. We love to have them in early. There's nothing worse than 11:58 the night that the application is due and panicking when your internet doesn't work anymore. So having those well in advance, continuing with those interviews, and fingers crossed you won't need the deferral strategy, but in the event that you are not admitted to an early decision school, coming up with plans B and C. So hopefully for those of you that had questions about, what should I be doing? This lays it out nicely and can help you prioritize what you need to be doing right now.
And then just one kind of comment on this. Emily's obviously done a great job giving you the overview. We want to make it clear when we're talking about things you need to be doing. We do this stuff with you. I know this kind of slide can feel a little intimidating when you're looking at all of these steps you need to be taking and all of these things you need to accomplish. So we're laying it out for you, but this is a very collaborative process. So we will partner with you every step of the way throughout this. One of the things that in my mind really distinguishes Logic Prep is the fact that we pair each of our application cycle students. You have your college advisor who is your primary architect, your person really building this process with you. You also then get paired with your individually handpicked essay coach. We go through a very thoughtful, scrupulous process where we are really trying to make that best relationship between each student and their essay coach. For most of our students, you are going to be writing probably between about 8 and 20 essays, supplemental essays typically, so perhaps not quite as long as the main Common App essay, but there is a lot of writing to be done. So that's one of the reasons we really start the essay writing process as early as possible. You will be paired with your essay coach. The essay process, the writing process itself takes place in June. And as Emily said, we definitely don't want anyone waiting till the last minute, but typically the writing process will continue through December. As we are talking about partnerships, and this holds true for essay coaches and for college advisors in their relationships with students. I say this a lot, and we are here to help in any way possible. But the nature of this work is that there are certain things we literally cannot do for you. We can do as much as we can with you. We are here to support you and guide you and give you as much structure as you need, but we need our students to show up ready to work. That means don't miss appointments, no late cancellations. Obviously, sometimes things happen. We understand that. But the more consistent you are in your meetings with your essay coaches and your college advisors, the more consistently you will move through the work required. We also assign independent work between sessions. Often college advisors are asking you to do some college research, virtual visits or tours of campus, or, asking you to help them narrow down your list or other tasks. Essay coaches in particular are going to give a lot of independent work in terms of working on essay draft and revisions. And it's really, really important that you do so. At Logic Prep, we are not asking students to do things just to pad a resume or look good in the application process. We really are asking you continually, what do you love and how can you continue to develop that? This process should be meaningful to you. It should be a lot about finding things that feel like an intuitive good fit and expanding on them in a way that's going to have a positive impact on your overall application. As I mentioned, working on essay drafts and revisions, a lot of that is going to be independent work between sessions and then coming together with your essay coach to talk through each next draft. With your college advisor, with your essay coach, we are going to do all we can to help you develop strong essay topics. I know this is can be a very anxiety-provoking issue for students who often feel like they don't have anything remarkable about themselves to talk about. I promise you, every single student has a story. Help us get to know you, help us find those things that are going to make great stories so we can help you shine in the application process. We're going to talk about this more specifically as you begin working with your essay coaches, but it is imperative that you do your own work. This applies to plagiarism. This applies to artificial intelligence. We really need you to do yourself the favor of letting your unique voice shine through in this process. And we don't want the process to be undermined by anything that is not truly reflective of you and your experience. We know that for students and families, this process can be very stressful, even for the most organized and on top of it students out there. Let us know when you need help, whatever that help may look like. You do not have to figure this all out on your own. And sometimes you need a little mental break or a stress break from this. Talk to us about us. Let us be there to make this work as rewarding and ideally stress-free as possible. Our goal in supporting you is to really help you be your best version of yourself in this process. And that involves helping to brainstorm and develop some topics. I've had a lot of students in conversation who, again, are adamant that they have nothing to talk about and then might just offhandedly mention an activity or an experience or a relationship in their life. And suddenly I see a tremendous, beautiful story unfolding. So let us help you by sharing these things with us. We will support you with essays and applications for up to 12 college applications. If 12 is not the number that suits you and you think you need more schools on your list, let us know. We can certainly figure out ways to offer support for more schools as well. Your college advisor and your essay coach work together as a team. They are both here sharing ideas, sharing drafts back and forth, making sure that the only thing that reaches the admission office is your best possible version of your application and all of your essays. Most importantly, we believe in each and every one of our students. We have absolute certainty that every student has a wonderful story to tell, a unique voice. Most importantly, we believe our students will thrive at whatever college or university they are lucky enough to land in, regardless of whether it's that tippy top college on your list or not. We know you will end up in the right place for you. It's important for us to also make it clear that parents, you play a role in this. And I know it's obvious, but not always talked about, that you are deeply involved in this process. Let's be honest. Not only are you helping your children manage a potentially overwhelming process, you're also preparing your children to leave the home and really to grow up in a lot of significant ways. So I will say there are a lot of things we don't want parents to do. We really want the children, the students, to drive this process as much as possible. But in order for parents to stay updated, please check, make sure that you are getting the emails your college advisors and essay coaches are sending out with updates. That's a great way to stay informed without getting overly involved in the essay writing or the application process. We want you to be cognizant of your level of stress and also understand that your children are under extraordinary amounts of stress, and not just with college applications. We all know that being a teenager right now is really hard work. They're trying to keep their grades up, they're trying to excel academically, they're trying to find their place in the world and continue all of their activities, and now also complete all their college applications. So I really recommend finding healthy ways for parents to talk about stress around the college application process in a way that is not going to make it any worse for their children. One of the recommendations I have is that you designate times during the week to sit down and get updates with your kids, talk about the college process, try to avoid making every car ride and every dinner meal conversation about colleges and what the student has done or hasn't done or what they're thinking about this or that in the process. The more you can focus in that time and limit it, I think the happier you all will be in other periods of time. One of the things parents absolutely can help with and should help with is managing logistics. In other words, if you're planning college visits, definitely you can go online and book the tours and info sessions, hotels and travel. One of the most important things that parents can be doing during this time, which is often overlooked, is teaching your kids basic life skills. It is shocking how many students go to college not knowing how to do their own laundry, not knowing how to manage a fixed income, not knowing how to be respectful of other people sharing a dorm room or personal space, and not knowing how to make healthy, smart self-care decisions in terms of being in a college environment where there's a lot more freedom to explore things that they may not have had the option to interact with in high school. Let your college advisor know if you need help, if there are things we can do to support you. You can always come talk to me as well. I am not just a college advisor, I'm also a parent of 2 college students, and I'm still stressed out, and my kids are already in college. So please come talk to me. I know how stressful this can be.
So now application deadlines. So as I was laying out kind of the time frame of when things are ideally going to be done and how we'll partner with you on making sure that you're following through and doing what you need to do, I mentioned application strategy and whether it would make sense to apply early decision versus regular decision. So I just wanted to share some information about what these deadlines are and what they mean. So many schools have early decision, which is binding, which essentially means that you're applying to this school, it's your top choice, you love it, you dream about it, you're 225% sure that this is your school. Those deadlines are typically in mid-November, and you would hear back before the end of the year. So during kind of that holiday break season is when a lot of students will hear back from their early decision schools. So it just means that you're moving on this application a little bit more quickly. Maybe you're prioritizing it and making sure that it's exactly the way that you want it to be. So mid-November deadline, and you're typically hearing mid to late December. It's binding, which means that the colleges are aware that you are applying to this one school through early decision, and you're through that application showing your commitment to that college. Essentially, if you are admitted to your early decision school, you will be sending an enrollment deposit. So there's that expectation and that sense of surety that the colleges, if they admit you, they know that you'll be enrolling. And many colleges will fill up to half of their classes with an early decision student. And so with that applicant pool, it's typically a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit easier to stand out. And so it's our recommendation, if you do have that top school, that making an early decision agreement can sometimes be the way to go. I have found with some of my students this year that they have had a lot of great success in early, and maybe some students that didn't decide to go early are having a little bit more struggles through the regular decision process because it's such a bigger pool of applicants. Schools have early decision 1 in November. Early decision 2 could be an option for you. Say that if you're not admitted to your top choice or early decision 1 school, there is the potential to still have that binding agreement in an early decision 2 round, which typically is in January. So 2 potential opportunities to say to those colleges, you're my top choice, you're where I want to go, either through early decision 1 or early decision 2. Early action is another great option for students that are looking at schools. If there is an early action round, you should absolutely do this if early decision is not offered. Early action, you're just getting your application materials in sooner. Again, it's usually a little bit of a smaller applicant pool. And I always like to play those odds and use those statistics to our students' advantage. If it's a smaller pool, it's easier for you to stand out potentially. It is not binding. So this is the main difference between early decision. Again, that's binding. If you're admitted to that school, you're going, versus early action, where you're demonstrating some interest, you're getting your application materials in early, but it's not that same level of a binding agreement. So you still have until May 1st to make that enrollment decision and submit your enrollment deposit. With regular decision, this is kind of your last option. If you're not early decision or early action, regular decision is a fine way to apply to schools. This is sometimes what my students will do if they're not quite sure, they're not committed to that top choice school. They want to see what their options are. And like I always picture those students that get their acceptances and are kind of laying them all out on the kitchen counter or the virtual kitchen counter on their computers and weighing all of those decisions before they make a decision by May 1st. I would say most of our students were recommending early decision or early action. But again, if those processes, maybe you're not successful with those rounds, having a few options in the regular decision rounds can be really helpful for our students. Regular decision does tend to be a larger pool. So statistically, acceptance rates are much lower in regular decision rounds versus early decision rounds. That's why I think it's helpful for you to do as much research as you can right now, to do those visits, to try to sort through your list and have like a top list of a top list of schools that you're really excited about, that can help you make those decisions of whether you want to do early decision or early action. But again, regular decision is a great way to apply, and it gives you more options potentially.
Just a couple things to follow up on what Emily's saying here. Just because why not make things super complicated? Every college is different. So not every college offers early decision. Not every college offers early action. Some offer both. Some offer one or the other. So definitely we will help you figure out the right strategy. And I think Emily's absolutely right that for many of our students, early decision or early action is a great strategy and makes a lot of sense. I think for some students who maybe perhaps have shown an improvement academically and are really working hard to build a stronger academic profile, early decision or early action isn't always going to work in their favor because colleges really want to see those first semester grades before they make a decision. Certainly, as Emily said, you know, if you don't love any particular one school above all the others, early decision is not really for you. And I think there is a misconception with early decision that if you apply to a school that is a significant reach for you, for anyone perhaps in the early decision round, your chances are going to be exponentially higher. That is not necessarily the case. I think when it's used strategically and really personally appropriately, it can be very big impact. And that's something we're happy to discuss with each and every one of you. We're going to talk a little bit about the application itself. And right now we're talking about the common application. There are a number of schools that have their own specific applications. Georgetown, MIT, and the UC application system, they are all asking for this exact same information, just structured slightly differently. Colleges are gathering this information because they are trying to understand what each individual applicant is bringing to the table. First thing they're looking at is, who are you? Where do you come from? Do you have a gender you identify with? What languages do you speak? What's your background? They want to know your academic setting, the school you go to, what the curriculum is. Basically, what they're looking at is, how well have you done in a potentially rigorous curriculum, and how rigorous is your curriculum compared to what's available in your school. Testing is something we're going to talk about more with you this year, probably, than we have. As many of you know, during COVID, all colleges went test optional. Many continue to be test optional. The UCs, for example, have eliminated all testing from their evaluations. However, many of the top, most elite colleges are now reverting back to requiring testing in the application process. So we really do want our students to have testing so that they can consider using it if it's appropriate for each individual school, and we can make a case-by-case decision about that. We understand that for some students, testing is not a healthy or good choice, and definitely want to support our students in that. Generally speaking, however, testing, the ACT, SAT, IB results, APs, are all part of the application process. They're looking at your activities. Who are you outside of the classroom in terms of what you're involved in when you're not, sitting in a school desk learning? And this can involve jobs, it can involve hobbies, it involves school clubs and activities, anything you do outside of school. It's all relevant. Colleges want to see a counselor recommendation and typically 2 teacher recommendations. I know Emily talked about this before when we were talking about timing. So we will definitely help you kind of think through which of your teachers might be good potential options for teacher recommendations. I'm just going to say this now. I really, really urge students to write handwritten thank you notes and give teachers a small gift when the recommendations are done. Teachers do not get paid for the extra time they take filling out recommendations for students. It's really something they do because they love their jobs and they love supporting you. And I think it's just a nice touch to recognize them. The personal statement is the main essay that you will submit on the Common Application. It goes to all of the colleges that you are applying to, versus the supplemental essays or the school-specific essays or questions, which may not be essays, but just short answers. And those only go to the specific schools based on their requirements and what they are asking for.
Great. And so we mentioned holistic process. I'm sure that you've heard holistic a million times, especially if you've been going on recent campus visits and information sessions. I feel like, especially highly selective colleges, they are frequently talking about that holistic admissions review process. And from my years of experience in reading applications, and Lauren's as well, there are so many things that our applicants would bring to that college campus. What makes them unique? What makes you unique? And that's something that we will work with our students through this college application process in trying to help you tell that story and have that narrative running through your application. And so it's really figuring out what makes you you. Are you a super bright student and driven, and all you've ever wanted to do is be an engineer, and you pursued everything that you can because that's who you are and that's really important to you? What are those kind of attributes that should be jumping off of the page of your application? Colleges are definitely looking at that. They're also building a class. And if they had students that were all engineers, the campus would look very, very different. And so they're trying to handpick students that they know will contribute to their college campuses. They want students from all areas of the country, all areas of the world, and want to have a diverse student body. And so as they're reviewing applications, they're keeping those things in mind. As Lauren mentioned, the curriculum and the classes that you're taking based in the context of your school. You will never be compared to a student that goes to a different high school that has different offerings. What schools will do and what college counselors will do is they will submit a school profile. So as colleges review applications, this is what I would do as I was reviewing applications. I would have the school profile on one side of my computer screen and the transcript on the other, and really see what classes has this student versus what's being offered. Are they taking advantage of some of the more challenging classes? If you attend a school that has IB or AP, that's helpful to have on your transcript. Some schools don't have those. Instead, they have honors classes. And college admission reps, we get to know the schools really, really well and figure out, again, what is this student doing in the context of their high school? It is very much an individualized process. Institutional priorities can also impact the holistic review. That's why, seemingly similar schools that may have similar middle 50% ranges for grades and scores, you might get a different decision at one school versus another, because maybe at school A, they just opened a new health policy major and they want to fill it with students that are interested in public health. And so suddenly there's this new opportunity for students that meet that particular criteria for that particular school. It could be that they lost their trombone player, or, any of these institutional priorities can definitely vary. And so that's why students are seeing, different decisions year over year, or even in the context of some very highly selective schools. Admission counselors are spending months and months looking at your applications. They're doing committee work to try to figure out what makes you special and how do you fit on that college campus. And thankfully, all of us here, we are trying to help you tell that story and make sure that you are standing out in this process. But every college does review a little bit differently.
And, as Emily was kind of getting at, like, how do you stand out? Okay, these are the components of the application. This is what a holistic review is. How do you connect with the reader of your application? And these are just some general guidelines, which I know are perhaps feel hard to achieve, but I think are pretty straightforward. When I talked earlier about doing your own work, I mean, we want you to be genuine. We want you to take a chance in expressing yourself, in finding those passions and expressing those passions in a way that might resonate with the reader of your application. A lot of you create lists very thoughtfully, where you're really putting the research in to make sure that the schools on that list are good fits for you in every way, in terms of your academic interests, your personality, your talents, your, really what you're looking for. Others are, I think, a little more driven by kind of putting certain schools on the list, regardless of whether they're actually really a good fit. The better the fit between you and the college, the better chance you have of making an impact and standing out to the reader of your application. We talk a lot about this, but when you're doing visits to colleges, that makes a huge difference, whether it's a virtual visit, whether it's an in-person visit. A lot of the colleges, particularly smaller colleges, are going to track what they call demonstrated interest. If it comes down to admitting 1 out of 10 students for that last spot, and one student has visited the campus and communicated with the regional representative and gone to the meeting at their high school when the rep was there, and the others have done nothing, they're more likely to admit the student who has shown up and expressed that interest. You can really reach the reader and stand out in this process by showing the depth and passion in your activities and academics. We get the question a lot about an extracurricular profile, like, what else should I be doing? And I think in some ways a better question is, what should I be doing more? It's not about filling up your resume with things that have no meaning to you. Not every student needs to do community service. Not every student needs to be a leader. But what are you doing that you genuinely love? And how can you expand on that or deepen that activity in a way that might be kind of original or thoughtful, or really help the reader see, wow, this student is passionate about environmental studies, and these are all the ways that they have demonstrated that. We talk, I feel very strongly about the fact that not every student is a leader and not every student should be a leader. I think every organization is made up of people who bring different kind of skills. So the question really is, what impact are you having? Maybe you are a natural leader. Maybe you're the person who's working more behind the scenes in your clubs, in your classrooms, the quiet leader, the person who's really showing up in a lot of very thoughtful kind of behind the scenes ways that also can really have an impact and allow you to stand out. I will say that in my time in admissions and since doing college advising, I've read thousands and thousands of applications, and I do not remember a single student's grades or testing, but I remember their stories and I remember the threads that really connected throughout their application and made them stand out. It's also really important as you are working on your applications. The better prepared they are, the more kind of cohesive and well thought out, and the better aligned they are, the bigger impact they are going to have. And part of that is make sure if you're writing your supplemental essay about wanting to do, environmental studies at this college, make sure they offer environmental studies. Make sure that the things you are expressing an interest in or an excitement about really do line up well with this particular college and what their kind of presentation or foundation is about.
Perfect. So as Lauren and I were planning this session, we thought it might be helpful to actually give you some examples of students. So we have three kind of mock profiles, and perhaps you'll see yourself in one of these profiles, your son or daughter in one of these profiles. But we just wanted to run through three students and let you know, based on our experience with highly selective schools, what the outcome could potentially be. And so for student A, this is a student who is very much into business. They've had some activities tied to business club president. They've done summer internship. They also do a little bit of community service. And so they're kind of in this business mindset. They are an IB diploma candidate, and they have some tough higher level IBs here with English, econ, and math. Again, that econ and the math choice, as an admission counselor, admission reviewer, I'm thinking, oh, the student must definitely be into business if they're pursuing econ and math. That's just hitting home again, that this is what their passion is, and they're taking classes that seem appropriate for that given major. Standard level classes as well, those look really good. But what stands out to me, especially for student A, is that predicted IB. And so that is part of the application process, that students who attend IB diploma programs, typically they're sending their predicted IB score. And so this is a very strong score. Those of you that are in the IB, you know that getting 40 and up is definitely, this is a strong student. So kind of that snapshot of student A into business, seems to be pursuing activities that relate to business, taking classes that can also demonstrate a little bit of a business prowess in math and econ. That's something that an admission committee would like to see, and grades really seems to be doing well in that IB diploma program. Test scores as well. So we are a school that would consider testing. And for these scores, the 1390 versus the 31, those are pretty similar. So if you do the SAT, ACT concordance table, a college would look at either of these scores, and they're kind of on that same percentile range. And so hopefully, as you see this student, this could be a potentially good candidate for our college that we're taking. But let's see what student B might look like here. So student B, different interests, wants to go into the law potentially. And we can see that this student is not doing an IB. So we are looking at student B in the context of their high school. They're not going to an IB school, so we can't expect them to take IB. They are doing AP classes. So we can see that that 6/12 means that 12 APs are offered. And over the course of their 4 years of high school, they've taken 6 APs. So they've taken half of the APs that are offered, 4 of which are in the 12th grade year. So it sounds like this student is pursuing some rigorous classes. I'm noticing, and maybe you guys are noticing this as well, with the GPA 3.15, it's okay. Maybe at our school, we want to see something a little bit higher. When I'm thinking of, looking back at my student A, I know that student A's grades were much higher than this student and student B. So kind of that B plus range, although it looks like they're doing well on their senior mid-years. So that's something, whether you apply early or regular, colleges will want to see how you're doing in your senior year. And so it looks like our student B is doing okay. Wow, look at this testing. So we've got a 1440 SAT and 29 ACT. The SAT is definitely higher. So that's what, as a college admissions committee, that's what we're going to focus on. We'll just pretend that 29 isn't there. We're looking at the 1440, which is a strong score. Looks like student B has some good activities as well, but I can't help but I'm having a hard time getting over that 3.15, even in the context of the rest of the application. So now I'm kind of thinking a little bit more. Here's student C. And so this student wants to go into journalism. I'm hoping that they've got some good writing classes. I see that they're taking English Lit in their 12th grade year, but then I'm a little bit bummed out because I can see that there are 27 APs offered at this particular school. Again, I'm not, looking at those curriculums in a different context. They've only taken 2 APs. And I know for the rigor of our school, that we probably want them to have a little bit more practice with those tougher classes. So that might be a little bit of a hang up, and it might be hard for me to get over that. Looks like the grades are okay, 3.56. So kind of in that A minus B plus sort of range, A's and B's on senior mid-year, that's great. Testing for this one, it looks like the 30 ACT is a little bit higher. That's what I'll focus on. It's an okay, and definitely an okay ACT score. The activities look really strong, and of particular note, as we were looking through letters of recommendation and looking a little bit more closely at the activities list, looks like this student is very, very heavily involved with writing and the newspaper and the blogging. That all ties back into their story of being into journalism. Other activities as well. But I think for student C, I think my main hang up for student C is that they're not taking advantage of the curriculum that's offered. They've only taken 2 out of those 27 APs. For student B, I think my main hang up is the grades. Pretty decent overall in terms of curriculum and activities and scores, but maybe they could be applying themselves in the classroom a little bit more. Love to see those grades a little bit higher. Student A, I'm thinking this one looks really good. Strong curriculum, strong grades, good testing, great activities. And so if we had to go through, I think this is what Lauren and I would decide to do. And of course, Lauren will have some feedback afterwards, but I think A is the way to go. And hopefully you at home can see why we might be deciding on A. B, I think we'll end up waitlisting B. There's still a glimmer of hope, again, because of the curriculum. Maybe the rest of their grades through the rest of the senior year will improve and give us a little bit more confidence. And then unfortunately with student C, because we are a highly selective place, it all came down to the curriculum. And so hopefully that gave you a good mini snapshot of what holistic review is, looking at everything, and then finding those little snippets that helped these particular students stand out. Lauren, were there things that you noticed just in terms of your
Yeah.
experience as well?
Just want to say really quickly, I know we're going to wrap up so we can leave time for questions, but I just want to say to all of you out there that we know these snapshots are just kind of data in a vacuum, and our job is to make sure that if there's a story to be told behind any of these things, a death in the family, an illness, something that might have impacted grades, or the student had to move, had a concussion and couldn't take APs. We want this information to be a part of your application process so that if someone like Emily or someone like me is reading your application ultimately, it helps us have a better understanding of why your application might not look quite as strong as someone else's. So I just want to kind of put that out there, that we understand that sometimes there are complicated reasons that some of these things look so different between students. We're happy to talk this through, but I know we've talked too much and I want to leave time for questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So anyone who has questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'd be happy to answer them. And if you have a lot of questions that are very similar, I will kind of filter that so that Emily and Lauren are able to answer them to the best of their ability. For those of you who may not know where the Q&A is, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a little button that just says Q&A on it. It has a couple of little message things, and you can just click on that.
Great question about nationality. For those of you who are not seeing this, the question is, what role does nationality play in acceptance? And Emily and I can both talk about this. The answer is it depends. And that's one of the things when we talk about the strategy around these applications and figuring out how to best structure a college list that is going to give you the best outcomes and the best options. Certainly that is one of these questions, is how many international students do they take? How does that factor into the application process? And for some schools, it's a real plus to bring that element, and for other schools, it's not going to have a particular impact one way or the other. For other schools, still they have to limit the number of international students. So unfortunately, it's not a simple answer to that question.
Yeah, that was a great question. We also have a really good question about the difference between sending a predicted IB score and an actual IB score. If a student has an actual IB score, does that weigh heavier? Is that more important? How do colleges approach that?
Yeah, so it comes down, it's a little bit of a timing in terms of the application process. So typically, students will only have a predicted IB score at the time that they are applying to colleges. And so that's what colleges are making admission decisions on. It's what is the predicted score. Now, you do have to follow through with that. So when the actual IB exams, you take those, you will be sending your actual IB scores to the school, typically the school that you're enrolling with. And if there's any large discrepancies, that can sometimes raise an issue, but it comes down to timing. So most students who are applying to college, they would just have their predicted IB. I guess in the event that maybe you're taking a gap year or sending your application after you graduated, you would have that score. But again, the predicted IB is what most colleges will be looking at in the review.
And I think for those of you on the Brazilian calendar where potentially you actually do get your real IB kind of right at the time that applications are getting submitted, that is where it becomes very important that it's either better than or basically about the same as your predicted. I think colleges in the US, many of them have a kind of good sense of how every high school seems to do predicted IB slightly differently. So I think that's something high school or colleges are pretty comfortable in figuring out. But ultimately, yes, we want to see alignment between a predicted and a real IB.
Yeah, really, really good, guys. Thank you. Um, we've got quite a few questions about sort of like what aspects play a part in the admission process, and are there any advantages to this or that? I think this kind of comes back to the international student question as well. So asking about, what role is it for student athletes in the acceptance process? Do minority students have an advantage in the admission process? Can you guys speak to that a little bit, and
Sure.
sort of what that looks like overall, and also some of the newer things that are happening in the admission world that are affecting that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of say at a high level, and I know Emily talked about this, but we are in the admission offices always looking, we are always trying to see the best in the student. We are always trying to see the qualities or attributes in a student that are going to help that student really stand out in the process. And so colleges have something they really call like attributes, and might have distinguished these slightly differently, but kind of the question, the issue is, if you're a student athlete, maybe you're going to be recruited, maybe it's just an element, it's something you bring to the table, maybe your ethnicity, your identity, your particular passion for one thing or another. These are all colleges are looking to build a very diverse group of students to fill out the entering class and the entire student body. I'll let Emily talk a little bit more about diversity because this has been obviously, as many of you know, the US Supreme Court has made a ruling about diversity, and there's a lot going on in the US with diversity initiatives. So I'll let Emily talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so last summer, the Supreme Court, much anticipated case came out that race and ethnicity could not be used in the application process. And so, in fact, when colleges are importing their data and doing their number crunching, they do not see the race and ethnicity of their applicants. Typically, since that is such an important part of who the applicant is and part of their story, um, on some of the supplemental essays, colleges will ask, is there something, an identity that is very important to you and speaks to who you are? And you can convey some of that information, but it cannot be the reason that a college would accept you. It has to be, again, the holistic review. It can't come down to race or ethnicity being the reason that you would be admitted. But again, it's part of your story, part of that holistic admissions process. And so that's very valuable information to convey to colleges, but it's just what they do with that information has changed and how they make decisions. But certainly we want you to share that identity if that's an important part of who you are.
And one thing, when we talk about these elements or factors that help you stand out, maybe we call them hooks or, whatever it is. One of the things that I think is really crucially important to understand about this process is that it is a human process. Sure, there is some numerical element to it that for a certain school, they're really looking for certain testing and certain GPAs. But these are human beings reading your application, making determinations, connecting with you, or maybe not connecting with you. That's something colleges are very aware of. That's why most colleges have at least two readers read applications and usually read them comment blind, meaning that the second reader of the application doesn't get to know what the first reader thought, so that they can form their own opinions. And for me, it's important that you all know that for a couple of reasons. One is I never want our students or families to make the mistake in thinking that not getting into a particular college means they're not good enough to get into that college, or smart enough, or accomplished enough. You are absolutely good enough and smart enough and accomplished enough. You just may not have connected with that college. Perhaps because when we were talking about holistic review, they may have some internal mandates that are out of your control. Perhaps there are just different elements that didn't really show up or kind of come forward in the application process in a way that is going to distinguish you. That's why it's really important, if there are things that really matter to you, we know about these things, so we can help you tell that story and formulate your identity in a way that is going to impact the reader.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. Let's talk a little bit. We have an interesting question about colleges that are potentially disregarding essays now because of the presence of AI and how that has been incorporated into the admission process. Can you guys speak to sort of your experience with how colleges are handling this AI revolution and what that might mean for students that are now applying and writing essays this summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what Lauren shared and kind of the expectations for students is that you are doing your work, you're writing these essays. It is a true reflection of who you are. And that's maybe a little bit Pollyanna and thinking that that's what every student is going to do. I think colleges look at your essays and they're taking it under the assumption that that is your work, and that's something that you've done. But I know as AI and ChatGPT, they're just becoming way popular. Sometimes it's obvious, and that's why you have a college advisor, an essay advisor to help you formulate your essay, so you don't have to rely on these other, AI technologies. I think that colleges can get a sense, as they're reviewing applications, which essays have that human voice, and seem like they're a reflection. But I have also heard that some colleges are just going through this and making decisions to change their essay review process. It's also a timing, getting back to timing. I think that most colleges don't have time to run your essays through that AI technology capture, and they're just again they're trusting that it's your work, and that you're telling your story.
I think generally speaking, I come at this from two perspectives. One is that yes, it's available and kind of goes against the whole purpose of the application process, which is to have you find your personal voice. You are really, I feel like you are doing yourself a disservice if you're using AI in this process. You are not allowing your voice to come through. You're not allowing a potential really strong connection with the reader. And then at a very real level, you are risking having your admission revoked. A lot of colleges are moving towards asking students to sign that the work is their own. I mean, you fill that out literally when you're submitting your application. And to my mind, it's not worth risking that potential liability.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add to that as well, from sort of from the college perspective, I think what this student was really trying to know is like, if I write a great essay, is a college going to care, or are they just not even really looking at essays anymore now because of the AI sort of threat that's happening? And my perspective on this is that colleges are still going to look at essays. If they ask you to
Absolutely.
write an essay, they will absolutely read it.
Yeah.
I also think in this kind of scenario, the content now becomes even more important than it ever was. Because let's say, even if you were to write an essay using AI or using ChatGPT or something like that, you're you're hopefully not fabricating the content of the essay, right? So where colleges may be making a shift is going from using an essay to determine whether a student's writing ability is up to snuff to more about using the essay as a way to learn about the student, which ideally in a ChatGPT world should not change, because even if you are using supports like AI to write your essays, the content should still be about you and the story should still be about you. So that is the thing that overall colleges are mostly going to get from your essays, regardless of how that came about.
Yeah, I echo that, Olivia. Please, if you are going to write a great essay, write a great essay. People are going to really want to read it. Don't think for a minute it's not going to count.
Absolutely. We are at the end of the hour. For those of you who do want to stay on for a couple more minutes, we will answer a few more questions. If you have to go, don't worry. All of this is being recorded and will be put on YouTube and on our website. So we will be sharing this out with you all in an email tomorrow with the recording and everything as well. So don't worry about that. I am also going to put in the chat really quick here the link to our survey. So please, if you have a moment, take a look at the survey. It should take you no more than a few minutes to complete. We'll be sending this out over email as well. In the meantime, we are going to try to answer these last few questions with the time that we have left. Someone was asking about applying to college's ED, how that's maybe not always advantageous. So how do you guys advise a student whose dream school is super competitive? Maybe they use ED, or maybe they use a restrictive early action policy. What kinds of things should the student be thinking about as they're strategizing whether or not to apply early to that school?
I think that they should definitely have a plan, right? And so whether you're going to do early decision one to that super high reach early school and have an ED2 as another option, I think, there are schools where maybe your profile just is so far out of the realm of possibility, but you still want to like just see what happens, and that can be okay. We would give you some advice and let you know, like, from a strategy perspective, it feels like maybe you're losing that early decision option. You could have been a stronger candidate at another more realistic early decision school. So we definitely would have those conversations. But in that way, it could be a little bit of a waste where you would have been a much stronger candidate at maybe not as crazy of a competitive school. And you could have that as an option. But I like those schools that have an ED1 and an ED2. But typically the crazy, the uber competitive schools just have that early decision one option. And so it's all about having those conversations and making sure that it makes sense for you and that you have a plan B as well.
Thank you, Emily. And then the last one that we'll answer live, for universities that are text flexible, like Yale, which is a new thing for them this year, how will they consider something like IB or AP if you're submitting those kinds of scores rather than submitting an SAT or ACT score? And particularly with IB, since typically those scores are only predicted until after the admission decision has been given. Any sense of what that might look like? Test flexible is a newer thing for a lot of colleges, so it's not something that is super well studied. But I'm curious what opinions you guys can share about that.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to give each college as many data points as you can for them to make a determination. And I know I've been talking about this as a very human process, and it is. But the more you can give them to point to how you're an academic good fit for that school, um, I think the better chance you will have of kind of getting that very intense, very personal read once you've kind of hit those academic and testing metrics. So definitely you're going to want to strategize this with your college advisor, because as we talked about at the beginning, not every test you have is going to be appropriate to send to every school you're applying to. But generally speaking, if you have strong testing, it's going to be worth sending in for consideration.
Awesome. Emily, anything to add?
No, that was great.
Great. Okay. We made it through all of the questions. Thank you guys so much for attending, for asking your questions. That was really helpful. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Please do review us on the survey and let us know how we did, if there's anything you would like for us to improve on for future events. And stay tuned for more info coming at you tomorrow with the recorded webinar, as well as some additional reading to just continue learning about this process and everything that we can teach you. So thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your night. We'll see you soon.